Well, joining me now in the Turkish town of Didim is Murat Aslan. He led the intelligence division within the Turkish armed forces and is now a security researcher at think tank the Seta Foundation. In Baghdad is Ahmed Rushdi. He's the senior foreign policy advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. And in Erbil is Hiwa Osman, who served as media advisor to former Iraqi President Jalal Talabani between 2005 and 2008. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Murat Aslan, is it absolutely clear to you that it was the PKK that did this and targeted Osman Köse and killed him?
For sure, because we know that PKK mostly conducted such kind of, assassinations in Turkey. And as you know, it was last month that they announced a building of a new organization to revenge Turkish operations in the north, at the north of Iraq. And we know that these two guys are heavily affiliated with PKK, either in Turkey or in northern Iraq. That means, yes, all indicators indicate and clearly, show that this attack was pure PKK commitment.
Right, and Murat, the fact that there was a denial that came out of the PKK, what does that suggest? Does it suggest divisions within the organization? What is it telling us?
Yeah, I do not see any moral aspect in PKK's strategy. And we have not witnessed any kind of, honor in terms of, conducting such kind of attacks to Turkish civilians or security forces or officials like Diplomat. This is a very clear, attempt that this attack was a terror act. And PKK is, struggling for justification of its presence and also in a process to legitimize herself. And mostly Western states perceive PKK as a terrorist organization and sometimes are hesitant to label it as a kind of secular organization. But this attack clearly confirmed the real face of PKK and what the PKK is actually in terms of a terrorist organization.
Ahmed Rushdi, what does it mean to you that this happened on Iraqi soil?
Well, it's a very strange incident that it can happen in Erbil, because we all know that Erbil is a secure place. North of Iraq is a secure place for all diplomats, not only in the regional diplomat, but also the international diplomat. And for Iraq as Iraq is actually it's a breach. It's a security breach. That I think now Baghdad, Erbil, and Ankara on the same line to try to solve this puzzle in a way or another and try to manage those security things. Especially Baghdad and Ankara has now, let's say, a very good relations in a way or another. And also Erbil with the presence of the new Prime Minister, Mr. Masroor Barzani. And he went to Baghdad, he talked to all the authorities, all the officials in Baghdad, which means that opening a new gate for a new era of Baghdad-Erbil relationship. So all those things, I think all those incidents that happened now, it will not affect the relationship between Baghdad and Baghdad, Erbil, and Ankara.
Right. Hiwa Osman, what is the context to this attack in your eyes?
First of all, I think we have to see the investigations have not concluded yet. It is not very clear if it's the PKK or not. I think it becomes wishful thinking to preempt any results of the investigation and to immediately jump to the conclusion. The PKK in these areas has been instrumental in the war against terror. They have been fighting ISIS tooth and nail alongside the international coalition in their different forms in the past. Of course, not as clearly as PKK. The PKK in the past, they have some presence on the border areas, but they have never conducted attacks like this in Iraqi Kurdistan or inside the city of Erbil in such a manner. Shortly after the incident, they issued a statement saying that they have nothing to do with this and they know nothing about it. So I don't know what's the logic behind doing an attack and immediately denying it. I don't know what aim is to be achieved. So it's very clear so far, in the absence of the investigation results and in the presence of daily shellings and attacks on civilian villages on the border areas of Iraqi Kurdistan, the villages, civilians, shepherds who with their sheep, with their herds in these areas, the continuous threat by the Turkish state against the Rojava or the Syrian Kurdistan can only suggest to the people here that definition of terror is very interesting for Turkey. I mean, for the gentleman, Mr. Murat Aslan, who was immediately jumping to that conclusion, I think he should be a bit more considerate with that, because we are still to see the results of the investigation and to see whether it is actually the PKK. And if the results come out,
certainly your answer had two parts.
Followed by
certainly, and sorry to interrupt you. Your answer had two parts, because on the one hand, you said initially we need to wait and see. Fair enough, nothing conclusive. But in the second part of your answer, you're providing a context for which you're suggesting this is why the PKK would attack Turkish interests.
No, right? to go straight away into that, in a situation like this that Turkey is going through, instead of talking about the possibilities of peace process, some kind of peace process in order to put an end to the bloodshed inside Turkey, to even now to go for the option of labeling this group and the other group as terrorists, and this
labeled
is
a terror
to jump into the conclusion that they
it's not that Murat Aslan made it up.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, certainly, but it's not like Murat Aslan made it up. It's a listed terror organization according to the definition of the state. But let's go to Murat for a response here. Okay,
look,
fair enough. But it's not as if he just pulled it out of nowhere, right? Hiwa.
The PLO and Mr. Mandela were also terrorist organizations.
Certainly, and we could have that debate about one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, but for the context of this debate, it's listed by the Turkish state as a terrorist organization. It's fighting it as a terrorist organization. Murat didn't make it up, right? Murat, Hiwa disagrees with you about the context, and he also feels that you're jumping to conclusions. Address that for me.
Okay, let's isolate the latest incident and later then question all other activities of PKK, either in Turkey, in Syria, or in Iraq. Can you say that PKK is innocent since PKK suppressed even the Kurdish people and assassinated civilians and forced families to deliver their sons or daughters as a member of PKK, or either paying at least 30,000 Turkish liras at the southeast of Turkey? So it's totally, your words are totally the words of PKK. Okay, the second issue is that the villages that you have mentioned are the bases of PKK, which are located to the border of Turkey. And third thing, there's a coordination mechanism between Iraq and Turkey, which is clearly identifying which villages are full or emptied by PKK. And after Iraqi officials confirmed that it is not Iraqis, settled individuals, they are being targeted by Turkish officers.
If you look at the map.
Okay? And finally, another issue. Let's take the history of PKK. What PKK did, for instance, to Turkish people in Syria. Now we have 400,000 Kurdish people in Turkey, which are, escaping from PKK. And the same is valid, in the Iraqi territory, because they are forcefully evacuated the villages because PKK just wanted to hold a kind of area that is, a kind of safe haven for them. Then why? People in Ahmadiyya insulted PKK members last week. So if you discuss the overall issue,
let's get a response from Hiwa.
PKK is a terrorist organization. That's it.
Hiwa?
Well, I think this line of argument will get Turkey nowhere. It's really unfortunate to see intellectuals and thinkers just repeating the rhetoric of the hardliners of the Turkish state. So if you want to go, and violence is usually responded to by violence. If you go, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it is very unfortunate to keep repeating and pressing the same rhetoric. Today, regardless of this incident, if it's PKK or not, Turkey is at an important crossroads. ISIS is defeated, thanks in part to the PKK, the PYD and the Iraqi Kurds, of course, who were who collaborated with the international coalition to defeat ISIS. Their presence in Sinjar in the early days was important to prevent genocide against the Yazidis when ISIS came, and in Kobani they were very instrumental. All of this was happening in full view of the Turkish army. They were watching all of this. They were hoping for all these areas to fall into the hands of ISIS. So if you go back to that area, there is always a counter argument for what you say.
Okay.
Unfortunately, today nobody seems to be looking forward.
Okay.
There are
the
leader of the PKK is imprisoned in Turkey. Recently, he has issued some statements for peace. It's not being reciprocated. The reciprocation is by shelling and bombing.
Okay.
One more thing on the geography.
Okay.
I would implore you to look at the map. The areas that are being shelled and that you are calling them bases of the PKK are right on the Iranian border. They are in Qandil Valley and Sidakan. Sidakan is closer to Iran than to Turkey. So it's, I would check my geography again and look at the map more clearly and look at the places of the attacks. These areas that are being shelled are on the Iranian border and they are not on the Turkish border.
Murat?
Okay, let me tell briefly. Where is Metina? Where is Zabkan? Where is Haftani? Are they just along the Iranian border? No. They are very close to Turkish border. And if you go through Qandil Mountains, for instance, you can see the main camp of PKK. And we know that they are heavily based and armed over there. And they are trying to cut all the civilian access to the mountain because there is only one pass towards the mountain. Second thing, if PKK is such a kind of brave organization fighting against ISIS, I don't believe that because it's only the US aerial support that made PKK stand firm. Otherwise, we would witness what happened in Ain al-Arab. PKK does not have any capacity to fight against any organization. And if PKK has a capacity, they are struggling for 40 years for something, but they are not successful. That's it. And another issue, Mr. Hiwa, your words are totally designed to influence the Western perception on PKK, but it will not change the image and also the reality about PKK. If you go, website and click PKK plus child, you can see the images of babies who are killed, directly killed by PKK terrorists. So who can justify it? Who can, tell us the reasoning of such kind of killings? And please, just ask, Kurds at the north of Iraq, just go to the, edge of the Turkish borders and ask families what they are thinking about PKK.
You can't even say Kurdistan.
And
you cannot even bring yourself to say Kurdistan.
Sorry for that, but your sentiments are purely and totally PKK. But unfortunately, you are a guide of Talabani, and I do not know whose interests you have defended. That's
Okay,
it.
I want to ask Ahmed Rushdi about what Baghdad does now, and also what the KRG does. So you've had the targeting and killing of a Turkish diplomat, most likely by the PKK, happening in northern Iraq at this moment in time. Things were possibly looking rosier during peace negotiations over the years, but that's fallen apart. There is no peace at the moment, and we're seeing symptoms of it within Turkey, we're seeing symptoms of it within Syria, and symptoms within northern Iraq now. What's the primary responsibility of both Baghdad and Erbil at this moment in time when it comes to Turkey and the PKK?
Well, let us note something. It's happened after His Excellency Mr. Masroor Barzani became the Prime Minister. So many security breaches happen. There are so many talks that Erbil is not safe anymore, and so on. So it's maybe some sort of internal dispute inside Kurdistan. In a way or another, it stopped. I think it stopped after Mr. Masroor made some sort of a security measurements, and also with talks with Baghdad, with the Prime Minister, with the President, and with the Speaker. It became obvious is that all the authorities in Baghdad is willing to help Erbil to maintain security inside Kurdistan. And another thing is that Baghdad will not accept any another security breach against any diplomat, either Arabic, or regional, or international. In a way or another, Baghdad and Erbil relationship will actually be in contact in a way that security aspect will be always priority between Baghdad and Erbil. This is first. And secondly, let us also notice is that those security breaches will also affect the economical situation, either in Baghdad or in Erbil. In a way or another, it will show that Iraq is not stable. Iraq is not a buffer zone anymore between all the crises that happen around Iraq. And also, let us also not forget is that Baghdad-Ankara relationship become more and more in contact and become more and more profitable for both sides, especially in the economical aspect. And all those things need to be managed well. All those things need to be studied well, and I'm supporting is that we need to wait until the investigations will be ended by the KRG authorities, and also I think Baghdad has some sort of impact on those investigations because at the end it's the central government need to know exactly what's happened, who is responsible for this major security breach.
Ahmed, Hiwa, and Murat, I've got to move on, but I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.